Hello and welcome to the TT Podcast, the podcast where we talk to one person from the world of the TT to discuss their lives, their journeys and their ambitions with the greatest motorsporting event in the world. And I'm joined by the greatest motorsporting host in the world, Steve Plater. Welcome back to the TT Podcast. It has been time.
Seems like forever. I suppose the last time was at the TT Daily Podcast.
Yeah.
It's been quite a while.
Sean Anderson. Brian Kringle and Sean
the doorman.
Anderson.
The doorman.
Exactly.
Hey, congratulations, mate, on the newborn.
Has he had a...
Yep, a little baby girl.
Oh, wow. Congratulations. And a win at the Manx.
At the Manx, yeah.
Amazing. Before we get into the guest, what have you been up to? Give me the lowdown on Steve Plater's life.
Oh, mate, it's been busy,
Plater's
obviously.
Paradise.
With the since the TT, flat chat with the BSB job, obviously the One Make Series, or mine, BMW's One Make Series at British Championship, bit of trials riding,
nice.
The best event of the year, which is the International 2-day Pre-65 trial, straight after the Manx, and Goodwood Revival.
Pre-65 is the age of the competitor, not the bike, right?
Get it, go and wash your mouth out. And then Goodwood Revival at the weekend.
Do you see anyone famous?
No. Do you know what? I mentioned this to the wife because normally you say, apart from that flipping, what's her name? Halliwell, Jerry.
Ginger Spice.
Yeah.
Some of us 90 kids
She was there with her hubby. He was racing cars. What's his name? The Red Bull man.
Christian Horner.
Yeah, Christian was there. Had a chat with him in the changing rooms. But no, with the weather being a little bit up and down, I think it kept some of the big names away, but it just kind of still plenty of driving stars, riding stars and so on. But I mean, your TV stars, probably a little bit less.
Talking of big names, we've got a big name on the pod. By the way, Steve, I'm all right, thanks. I've not been up to much. Don't worry about it. No one cares anyway. Nothing. Thanks, producer Tom. Cheers, mate. Talking about big names.
Has it broke?
As what broke?
Tinder.
Sure, don't try it. No, don't look interested in my life now. You had your chance to ask me, and now I refuse. Big names. We've got a big name from the sidecar world.
Yep.
A guy that has been hounded. Nah, I joke with him because every time I see him, he says, when am I going to get on that podcast? Is that how he talks? When am I going to get on that podcast?
Is that your diamond geezer? Is that your Kent accent? Is it? You're right.
You're a Kent. Tim Reeves is on the podcast coming up. Tell me what you know about him beforehand. Like I say, the only time I see him, the only question he's got for me is when am I going to be on the podcast?
Captain competitive in everything he does in his life. Obviously a multiple world and British champion on a sidecar, TT winner. Arguably, probably wishes he'd won more TTs so far.
Well, who doesn't?
But that's what spurs him on and keeps him going. Of course, he's fast enough too. He just needs to, I've said it so many times, the stars need to align a little bit. But yeah, so he's coming on and hopefully give us a better insight into his life, sidecar racing life, and the future.
Before we get him on, let's just put some context behind this. He's not coming into the studio. I thought it's because he was banned from the north, because he's a Southerner. But it's not. He now resides in Holland, in the Netherlands, about 5 minutes away from Assen, he was saying. So if you're listening to this and not watching this, then the audio might sound slightly different between us and Tim, because Tim is thousands of miles away. But without further ado, roll those titles. Tim Reeves, welcome to the TT Podcast. Listen, we might be a little bit wooden here because we have not done this for a long time. Me and Steve have sat down for the first time in a couple of months. But what a guest to reignite the TT Podcast. Nothing to do with the fact that you've been asking to come on it for God knows how long now.
Anyway, I felt really left out. It's been so long. I thought I was actually hurt. I thought they've missed me out. Why are they not inviting me?
Please, sir. Can I have some more?
Save the best till last, eh?
Exactly.
That's it, mate. Thanks, Steve.
Right, Tim, how are we, first and foremost?
Yeah, really good. Thanks, Chris. All good, mate. Just busy with my... I just telling Steve after the TT and the 700 were finished and got them out of the way, I've secured some sponsorship for 25, and the guys put some money in the pot for me to stay sharp for the rest of this season. So we've been building my World Championship bike up, and I've entered the last 3 rounds of that, so I've got something to look forward to.
Is that your way of saying I don't have to find a normal job for another year?
Well, that's about right, yeah. I don't, yeah.
Stay sharp for the year.
Exactly. I can have that long journey from my house down the hallway, out my garage door, and go to work every morning, so it's much better.
Love it. Right, as an avid fan of the TT Podcast, you will know The first question that we always start with, and it is about that tap on the shoulder. I've worded it a million different ways, but essentially, Tim, we've been doing it since 2008. You've had plenty of taps on the shoulder, regardless of practice or racing. How does it feel going into no man's land? Has that feeling changed as you've progressed through your TT career? If you go back to one of those moments when the pressure probably was at the highest, whether that was your first ever TT or when you were vying for a TT win, getting that hand on the shoulder, waiting for that flag to drop, what kind of emotions, what kind of feelings are you feeling during that moment?
Yeah, well, for me, I don't think it ever changes. It doesn't get any easier, for sure. It's like you're saying goodbye to everyone. You just don't know, do you, what's around the corner? It's like you have to say goodbye to everyone, and then you push your bike into that little area, and it's all of a sudden it becomes very peaceful, and then you can switch off, can't you, and get on with your job in hand. But the build up to it, for me, is worse. It's the bit when everyone wants to shake your hand and pat you on the back and wish you luck and say see you in a bit and all that. But it's just, for me, it's just feels like you're saying goodbye to everyone, but it never changes, because it's so every time it's the same amount of pressure, and it's whether you're fighting to win or if you're a newcomer or if you're just going to enjoy yourself. It's still it's a big step, isn't it? And it's something that I haven't found in my racing career anything that replaces it. I mean, I started a TT career quite late, really. I wasn't interested when I started road racing, on the road. And when I started, I just wish I'd started a lot earlier, because that feeling, you can't replicate it in any short circuit racing you do. It's just not the same.
Just on that note of starting the race, and obviously people giving you hugs and kisses and everything, whether it be a rider, a driver or a passenger, is that a negative for you? Would you just rather get on with it?
I do find it, that part, I find it a bit emotional, really, because I know everyone means well, but I try to keep my head down and speak as little as I can and try and focus on getting on with it, because I did find one year it sort of took my mind off the game a bit, and I feel now that I just try and, I don't be rude, but I just try to keep myself to myself, walk up there at the last possible minute, so I don't have to do lots of that, and try and focus on what I'm doing, because it's just, obviously everyone's meaning well, but it just feels like you're saying goodbye to everyone every time.
Yeah, I remember the first time I ever went up onto the start finish line, 2018, I think. I was working for RST, and I remember being up there, and I started like physically shaking. I was like, these guys are just heading off straight down this road, and they may never come back. I'm like, why do they do it? And then obviously once they set off, and then you see them come in, and they get laps under the belt, and they get faster and faster, and then you start to understand what the TT is all about. And once you realise that, you're like, you wouldn't ever want to stop someone feeling that feeling that they're getting, because, like you said, there's no other feeling like it, is there?
No, and it's hard. You can't expect. It doesn't matter. Steve will know what I'm saying. You can't tell anyone what it's like.
No,
it's I know you're quite an expert now, and you've been there a lot. But unless you throw your leg over something called climbing a sidecar and set off down the hill, you can't ever explain to anyone what it's like. And I think that's what makes sidecar racing so special, because you're able to share it with somebody when you set off and you do your 3-lap race or whatever. You come in, and every moment you've had or good part you've had, you get to share it with someone. Whereas, Steve, when you're on your own, you can't explain to anyone. You could have had the best feeling of your life at a certain part of the track, and you can't come in and say, what about that? And no one understands. But when you've got a sidecar passenger, they know what you've been through. So that's what sort of makes sidecar racing different, because you can share your experiences.
So then, like you said, you got into sidecar racing at the TT very, very late, or relatively late. Take us back to the start of your journey as a sidecar driver then. So you're from a family of sidecar drivers. Your dad was a sidecar driver.
Yeah, obviously, I'll just quickly tell you this story. I mean, the day I was born, he literally chucked my mum in an old transit van, dropped her off at the hospital, and he raced off to Crystal Palace and raced in the last ever race at Crystal Palace. And then he made it back to the hospital literally 10 minutes before I was born. This is what they tell me now. So I was obviously going to be brought up into it, wasn't I? And
he was obviously quite thoughtful then, because he dropped her off.
Yeah, it was nice.
Well, he was just the typical selfish racer. You know what it's like. Yeah. He literally didn't make a walk. I don't think there was taxis then. It was back in the early 70s. So, yeah, he literally dropped her off and set off to Crystal Palace.
What circuit was it? Crystal Palace?
It was actually in Crystal Palace in a park. There was a motorcycle racetrack. They had Formula One Grand Prix there back in was it 50s, I think?
Yeah, I can remember. I interviewed John Surtees for a weekend. That was a one of his favourites, because obviously it's quite local to him.
Never knew that. Sorry, mate. Carry on. Sorry.
I got brought up with racing for all my life. I spent every weekend at racetracks. My dad was never into the Isle of Man, unfortunately, so I never ever went there till nearly 2002 was the first time I went there. But all my life I was in paddocks every weekend with my family, and I grew up in the paddock really. And then obviously I was never going to go anywhere else, was I? It was going to be sidecar racing, and I could never really afford to start on my own. So my dad said, well, if you passenger me first for a few years, I'll let you take over my bike, because he always had good equipment. And that was the plan. But then every year it got dragged on, and it got to the point where I'd sort of had enough. And he said, he kept promising me that I could take over the next season. And it never happened. And then I think it was 1998 was the first time I'd entered a race meeting at Brands Hatch, a club meeting with my brother. And literally the bike was all loaded up and prepared and ready to go. And at that time, we used to have an old converted coach. So it was all loaded. I got it all prepared, ready on the Friday afternoon or whatever it was. Me and my brother had loaded it all up, and we were getting ready to go. And then he arrived at the workshop, and he changed his mind again, took the keys off us and said, no, you're not ready yet. You're not riding it. So I walked away and kept my mouth shut and went home. And I rang my brother. I said, right, that's it. I said, I'm going tomorrow. I'm going to break in that bus. I'm taking it. So I'm going. I'm not waiting anymore. Anyway, my brother wouldn't come. He said, no, I'm not doing that. I said, I'm sorry, mate, but I'm going. So if you're coming, good. If not, I'll find someone else. So that's literally what happened. I waited till it got dark. I borrowed a van off my mate. We went back to the yard, broke into the coach, broke a lock on the rear emergency door, got in. I unloaded the bike, loaded it into my mate's van, and off I set to Brands Hatch. And that was how I started, really. And that was my first drive.
How did the old man take that?
I couldn't. Yeah, I wouldn't have. He would have. My dad was great. He was, I've got so much respect for my parents. He was real strict with us when he brought us up. So I knew that I had to stay out his way. But luckily for me, I arrived at Brands and put on a really good show. And he got lots of phone calls off of people saying, why aren't you here? And flipping out, Brian, you want to see what he's doing? And he I think it sort of calmed him down a bit. But I knew to stay out of his way. So it took, 3 weeks later, we spoke again and he calmed down. I knew he wasn't going to hit me. So. And then it just went from there, really. And then the next season, I started driving in '99 with my brother. We did some British Championship races, but I always wanted to move on. I wanted to just set my eyes on wanting to be a world champion. And I never won any championship until I won the World Championship. As soon as I won a club race, I moved on to British Championship races. As soon as I won a British Championship race, I went to European Championship. And then as soon as I won a race there, I moved on to the World Championship. Then I won in my second year of full time in the World Championship. Yeah, so I was quite lucky, really.
So if you'd have not broken into that coach and stolen the sidecar, at what point do you think your dad would have given you the chance? Or did he not want to do that because he knew that the moment he passed on the mantle, as it were, that his career would be kind of done?
I think that's exactly it, Chris. He didn't want to stop. He wasn't ready to stop. I think he knew that, obviously I'd always had motorbikes, and he knew that I must have had a bit. He knew I had talent about me, and I think he knew that if I got on it wouldn't be long before I was quicker than him anyway. And then, he used to go good. He was a good national runner and would be a top 10 in the British Championship. But he knew that I would beat him quite quickly, I thought. And I think he just kept putting it off and putting it off and putting it off. But unfortunately, that sort of that was the step I had to take to be able to do it.
You see, you're not really very competitive then. Even as a youngster, you just thought, I'm better than my dad anyway. I'm not going to go and flip and use a sidecar and beat him.
It's hard, Steve. When I passengered him, I used to scream in my helmet. I'd be like, open the throttle. I sort of took to it quite quickly. I've always been really competitive. I'm really bad now. Anything I do, I have to be first or at least be fighting for it.
So let's talk about sidecars. So my first experience of sidecars was kind of like the 80s. So the likes of Steve Webster, Tony Hewitt, and those guys. We've seen kind of, the rise and fall of sidecars, and it's fair to say that nowadays it probably doesn't get the airtime that it deserves, whether that be World Championship or at the TT. So, but talk us through how big, because you'll know about the history a lot more than probably me, maybe not so much Steve, but how big was sidecars back in the 80s going into the 90s? It was huge, right? The World Championship was and I'm not taking away from your World Championships, But back then it was a huge, accolade, weren't it?
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, in especially in the seven, it goes right back to the BMW days, really. When it was all the Germans were on the BMWs. It's got such a lot of history there, and that's when it started to be really strong. And then obviously it followed the Grand Prix, didn't it? And right through the 70s and 80s, in my opinion, the 70s and 80s were the glory days, especially with Webster and Beeland and Stroyer. And I mean, Egbert Stroyer is my neighbour now. I literally look out my kitchen window, I look straight into his kitchen window. So it's they were all heroes when I grew up. And I mean, back then they were primetime television, didn't they? They were on terrestrial TV. And I mean, Egbert, I've sit with him in the pub and he tells me stories of what it was like when he was racing, and the money that was about them was unreal. It's just as they were earning, the top guys then were earning the same as the 500 riders, and it was big money, and that was for sure the glory days, without a doubt. Unfortunately, it's never going to get back to that because everything's moved on, and you can't. A sidecar's not public transport anymore like it used to be, and in the 50s and 60s and early 70s, it was family transport, so it was a lot more relative, if you like, and in fact, and manufacturers used to put money into it, and that unfortunately is never going to happen. So it obviously was much stronger back then.
So were the teams that raced back then, were they factory teams? Would they have full factory backing from companies, or would they be like yourselves? Would they be building their own stuff?
No, sidecars have always been privately run teams, all by themselves. Webber was his own. He was his truck driver, his manager, his all-in putter-upper, his found his own sponsorship. He used to do everything like we do now. It's no different, and it's always been the same. But solo riders were the same then in the 70s and 80s. The grid then you could just rock up with a I'm guessing with a 500 and just you fought to try and get a place on the grid to qualify. That's what sidecar racing was like then. And I think the solo classes were no different.
So in terms of solos, did you ever fancy having a little bash on them or not?
No. My eyes were always focused on sidecar racing. I guess because I got brought up with it with my dad. And I mean, I was real good friends with Darren Dixon. I mechanic for Darren for 2 years in '93 and '94. So I did like it, but it just didn't appeal to me. As in, I just wanted to be a sidecar driver. That was it, really. It's because I got brought up with it, and I was around it all my life from literally from the day I was born. So it was quite obvious that's where I was going to go.
You said about obviously sponsorship talk, just brushed over that a little bit, and it's all sorted out for 2025. How difficult is it as a team to attract sponsorship to the sidecar racing, whether it be TT or short circuit?
Yeah, it's really hard, Steve, because unfortunately there's no real media platform for sidecar racing. Only the TT. The TT is the only thing that really allows us to sell it. For the last 5 years, I've been amazingly lucky with the guy that I've had backing me. He's with sidecar racing. It's not about getting a corporate company involved. It's about people that like the sport or people you know. It's not. You're not going to get. I don't know, Ford or Coca-Cola, or you're not going to get them involved with sponsoring a sidecar team, and that's just the fact of it. It's got to be people that are interested in motorcycle racing. You can entice them to come and be involved in the sport, because for a sidecar team to offer to someone, say who's the head of marketing in the company, we can offer them a bit closer to the action for a lot less money. So that's the only way you can find money, really. And the TT is now the biggest platform for us to be able to try and draw the money in, without a shadow of a doubt. But all my sponsors are people that have been with me for more than 10 years, and they're all guys that I got introduced through racing, that like a form of motorsport. Some of them have helped solo riders before, some have helped cars. But then when they've got involved with me and they come for the weekend and have a bit of crack and a drink and a beer and relax, and then you can sort of entice them in. But it's really difficult because there's nothing to sell. There's no media platform, unfortunately, especially with the World Championship. There's no live coverage or big media backing for it. So it is very hard yet.
So obviously you said earlier you kind of stepped in, started to win at club, then jumped to British, won there, jumped to the World Championship, and obviously very quickly made your mark. Why did it? First of all, why the TT? But secondly, why did it take you so long to decide to go over to the Isle of Man TT?
Being brought up around short circuit racing rather than road racing. I'd never looked at the TT, and I always thought that the guys were a little bit crazy. I used to, obviously, there wasn't as much media when I was a kid. It wasn't as much TV and social media like there is now, so it wasn't as easy to follow. But I think I went there in 2002 as a first time as a spectator. A good friend of mine, Steve Norbury, unfortunately, he was a podium finisher in the sidecar races. Unfortunately, he lost his life at Hockenheim in 2008. But I went with him for a week to see what it was like. And when I got there, I couldn't believe it. I was like, well, why haven't I done this before? And I said when I left there, and this was in 2002, but I hadn't won a world championship, and I needed to focus on that. And I sort of said, right, I will come back here one day, but I'm not coming back until I've got a bike. So I never went back to watch again. I just focused on trying to become a world champion. Then when I won in 2005, which was great, and then I still didn't have an eye for it at all. I just wanted to try and do the hat trick like Steve Webster did. So I did. I won in 5, 6, and 7, and then literally the last round in Le Mans, Dave Monaghan walked up to me with an envelope from Paul Phillips. So I've got something for you to look at. Anyway, it was like an invitation, and there was a hotel room on it and a hire car and a weekend in the Isle of Man. He said, Paul would like you to come over. I'd like to meet you and see what you think. So I thought, well, why not? And that was literally how I got enticed to come and have a look. I went over in November of 2007 and spent the weekend with Paul. Had organised everything. I just arrived. I think the first night I met with Molly, we went for dinner. Then I spent the next day with him. Then the next night we went with Nick Crowe and his family. And then the next day I went out with him on the track. And then I met Paul on the Monday and discussed about the possibility of me coming to ride there. Obviously, as a 3-time world champion, the current world champion, I think Paul was quite keen to get me there. And that's how it started, really. And I sort of went on from there. And obviously, when you're running the team yourself and you're finding the money and doing everything yourself, it's hard to try and build another sidecar, which was probably 30,000, 40,000 pounds at the time, and then take the time to test it and prepare it and then come back. So I had to look at options where...
Just explain that to the listeners, Tim. Obviously, we know why 2 separate sidecars, but what's the difference between World Championship and the Isle of Man TT?
So my World Championship bike it's a fully aluminium monocoque chassis with hub centre steering. It's built of all exotic materials, if you like. It's all titanium, aluminium, carbon fibre. The engine's behind you. It's very light. It wouldn't be strong enough for the road racing, and the rules don't allow you to use that on the road. Now that particular chassis lined against the TT chassis, you would probably be on a short circuit 4 or 5 seconds lap faster because of the way the bike's balanced and the way it steers. And then with regards to a TT bike, they're steel framed, and it effectively has like a set of forks like a motorbike and a rear swinging arm like a motorbike, because obviously effectively originally they were motorbikes and they've just come down in height and wider tyres. So yeah, there's a lot of difference in the construction. The engine's in front of you on the TT bike, so you sit with your arms around it, and they just handle quite a bit different. Yeah, like I said, on a short circuit of say Donington Park, you would probably be 4 seconds a lap slower on the TT bike compared to the World Championship bike.
Oh, hell, that's huge.
Massive, eh?
Mm.
So going back to how I got there, just literally at that time of when Paul offered me the deal to come, Steve Webster had just taken over a deal. Louis Christian, who is LCR, who built my World Championship bike at the time, had just started to manufacture a TT bike, which is now obviously what Ben and Tom took over and what most of the TTs have been won in the last sort of 10 or 15 years. So literally at that time, they were just being imported into England, and Steve Webster was going to be the guy who Louis Christian was going to build them. Steve was going to import them into the UK, put the final preparations to, and then sell them to English customers. So I rang him up and said, look, I've been made this offer. Do you fancy getting involved? And Steve said, yeah, I'll build you a bike and I'll own it, but I'll supply it to you for the year and we'll have a go. And that's what we did. We built a bike and we literally got steam straight into it. By December, it was built. We went to Spain second week of December and I sat on it for the first time. Bearing in mind, I'd never ridden a short chassis bike before. Most people, when they start on the short chassis bike with the 4-meter engine. If they want to then move up to the longer bike to carry on to go move forward into World Championship, that's normally the progression. But I'd never started on a short bike. I'd started immediately on a long chassis because I'd come from being a passenger. So it was quite new to me as well, jumping back on a short bike, not back on one for the first time. And obviously it steered a lot differently to what I was used to. But yeah, after 3 days, we were up to speed, and I was lucky. I had Patrick Farrance with me at the time. He was my current passenger then, and he had obviously already done the TT at quite a good speed with Andy Laidlow. So he was gave me a good bit of guidance, really. And yeah, it wasn't. So by the time it got to the beginning of January 2008, we were ready to go. And then I went back to the Isle of Man, sat with Paul, and said, "Right, let's get it organised. I'm ready to come. I've got a bike. Let's do it." That's how it started.
Not fazed by it at all. Not fazed by the danger and lack of runoff that you'd experienced with short circuits, or not?
No, absolutely. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't. I absolutely was shitting myself, to be honest. But I couldn't show that to anyone because, I had quite a bit of pressure on my back. I just won back-to-back 3 World Championships and 3 British Championships, and I was and obviously everyone was, and knowing that I'd never sat on one of these short bikes before, everyone thought they were going to. It was I was going to kick my ass, and it was a lot of pressure, but I didn't let anyone know that. But I can remember coming, and not only that, and then when I came to the TT for the first time, it was the first round of the World Championship at Donington Park on the same weekend as the first night of practice. So Paul was great. He organised a private plane for us, and we were flying backwards and forwards we flew to the Isle of Man, prepared everything, got everything set up. Then I flew back to Donington, did Friday, flew back to the Isle of Man for Friday night, got everything else prepared, did scrutineering, did the riders briefing, flew back to Donington for Saturday, qualified, and then literally jumped off the bike, got in a hire car, went in a taxi straight to the airport, and I literally just got back in time for the first practice of newcomers lap. And I can remember walking up, and everyone had prepared the bike for me, and I was absolutely shitting my pants. And I couldn't let anyone see that.
Yeah.
And I set off, and I was like, I so wanted to do it, but I also didn't want to do it. I was like, should I do this? I've got so much to lose if I can't do it. But yeah, and then I set off, and it was absolutely amazing. I've told it so many people how great it was, and I couldn't wait. Once I got back in after that first lap behind, I think I followed Roy Hanks in my first newcomers lap, and I got back in, and I just could not wait to go again. I loved it, and yeah, I've not looked back since. It's just amazing. What a great place.
What was obviously when you finally made the decision, and the agreement with Paul Phillips to go and race the TT? What was your father's opinion, and your brother?
My brother, he'd stopped. He stopped at the end of 2006, so he'd already stopped from racing anyway. I think now he wishes he'd done it. He obviously comes to watch a lot and wishes he could have done it. But my father, he's somebody he's a proper old school bloke. I've met your dad, Steve. He's a proper man like your dad, a proper worker, grafter, a strong man. He's never ill. He's like, he doesn't take any shit. But he came to the TT. He really didn't want me to do it. And he came there, he was there, and he was quiet for the whole fortnight.
Was he?
And then we got home, and I'm not joking, he was ill for 2.5 weeks. And I've never seen him be ill. The worry from those 2 weeks made him ill when we got home, and he was in bed for a week, just run down and stressed out and ill. So yeah, he didn't like it.
Had he said he was worried, had he said, please don't do it, would you have ever taken that? Would you ever listen to him if he'd have said that?
I've got a better question. What if he'd have gone in the back of your truck and stole your sidecar?
Do you know what? I really wouldn't have put it past him. I really wouldn't have done it. Yeah, I was 35 when I first went to the TT, so I was obviously a grown man. But he never once said to me, "Oh, you're not going, you're not doing that." But obviously he's worried, wasn't he? All fathers are, aren't they? He's still. He's 78 now, and he still moans at me like I've been 18.
Right, we're going to hold part 1 there. We're going to get Tim back for part 2 next week, where we will discuss his first ever podium at the TT, which came, Steve, when was it?
2008, first year.
His first year.
Too easy, eh? Too easy.
Join us next week.